This is the WGNS Action Line, talking with Rutherford County newsmakers about what matters most to you.
Your host, J. Paul Newman of the monthly District Attorney Show.
The viewpoints and opinions expressed on this broadcast are the viewpoints and opinions of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints and opinions of this show, its host, or the management of this station. You are listening to WGNS. We welcome everyone to the program. My name is J. Paul Newman. My co-hosts today are Rutherford County District Attorney General Jennings Jones and Rutherford County Assistant District Attorney Trevor Lynch. We thank WGNS for providing the airtime. And we also thank our producer, Scott Walker. Most of all, we thank you for listening. We will begin our broadcast after you listen to these important messages.
The Braves, MTSU, local sports. Yeah, we got them. Your local sports connection is WGNS, AM, FM, online.
When we started our flagship restaurant on Broad Street, who would have known we'd have grown and touched each four corners of Rutherford County? Now we have locations in South Murfreesboro, Smyrna, West Murfreesboro, and the original on 860 Northwest Broad Street.
Swing by one of our 4 locations after a game for some good food and fun.
Thank you, Murfreesboro, Smyrna, and Rutherford County.
Thank you to our patrons and customers.
Thank you.
Good food and fun.
This message brought to you by the Central Tennessee Regional Solid Waste Planning Board. Visit RecycleRightTN.com for tips, ideas, and locations on where to recycle near you.
Don't be trashy, recycle classy, recycle right, Tennessee.
Recycling isn't just about tossing materials in a bin, it's about knowing which materials are accepted. Go to RecycleRightTN.com.
Recycle right, Tennessee.
This is Inside the Courts. A look at this month's trials, pleas, and grand jury action. Inside the Courts is presented as a courtesy of the Rutherford County Clerk's Office.
Good morning, everyone. This is your District Attorney General, Jennings Jones, and today I will be your tour guide through this episode of Inside the Courts. We begin this segment by stating that none of the defendants named in any upcoming trials have been convicted, and they are presumed by our law to be innocent. With that as a prelude, we will now go inside the courts. On October 13th, officers with the Murfreesboro Police Department responded to a 911 call for shots fired at a residence on Las Casas Pike in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Upon arrival, officers discovered Mr. Jaleel Turner lying unresponsive on the floor of his apartment, suffering from a gunshot wound to the abdomen. Mr. Turner later died from his injuries. Detective William Pullius with the Murfreesboro Police Department was assigned as the lead investigator. Miss Shakira Brown has been charged with second-degree murder. Miss Brown is represented by counsel Mr. Brent Horst, and the state is represented by Assistant District Attorney Trevor Lynch. This matter is next scheduled for appearance in General Sessions Court on February 17th. On January the 15th of 2023, officers with the Murfreesboro Police Department responded to an apartment on Cobalt Row regarding a shooting that occurred during the early morning hours. It was reported that 2 victims had been at the apartment, and when they left, they were followed by Mr. Adarius Robertson, who drove alongside and then behind them. Around the intersection of South Rutherford Boulevard and MLK Jr. Boulevard, Mr. Robertson began to fire into the vehicle. Bullets struck the rear passenger door, the front passenger seat headrest, the front windshield, and the driver's window. The shooting was witnessed by a Rutherford County deputy who was coincidentally stopped at that intersection. The deputy pursued the defendant into the county and back into Murfreesboro, where the deputy was required to terminate his pursuit for safety reasons. Shortly thereafter, Adarius Robertson wrecked his vehicle and was arrested by the Murfreesboro Police Department. A preliminary hearing was held on April 23rd of 2024, and the court bound the matter over to the grand jury. On July 14th, a jury trial was held, and on July 17th, a jury of his peers found Mr. Robertson guilty of 2 counts of attempted second-degree murder and 1 count of aggravated assault. A sentencing hearing was held on September 24th, and the defendant received a total sentence of 18 years to serve in the custody of TDOC. The defendant was represented by counsel Miss Amanda Gentry, and the state was represented by Assistant District Attorneys Tammy Reddig and Sarah Davis. On January 9th of 2023, Detective James Wilkinson with the Murfreesboro Police Department was assigned to investigate allegations of child abuse by Mr. Trevosia Miller. Mr. Miller struck his minor child on the legs approximately 15 times with a belt because the 5-year-old child defecated on the floor. This act left severe welts and bruising on the child. In March of 2023, a Rutherford County grand jury indicted Mr. Miller for aggravated child abuse of a child under the age of 8, and on October 31st, Trevosia Miller pled guilty to the attempted aggravated child abuse of a child under 8 years old. A sentencing hearing is scheduled for February 6th. The defendant was represented by counsel Mr. Daniel Murphy, and the state was represented by Assistant District Attorney Hugh Ammerman. In March of 2023, Detective Jesse Gamble with the Rutherford County Sheriff's Office was assigned to investigate allegations of child abuse resulting in death. On March 8, 2023, a 3-month-old child was transported to the hospital. Emergency personnel were unable to resuscitate the child, and the child was pronounced dead. An interview of the child's grandmother, Cheryl Bodley, resulted in several conflicting stories, ranging from the child choked while she was bottle feeding the child, to the child was asleep in the bed next to her while she played on her phone and then fell asleep, with Miss Bodley then waking up to the child not breathing and being cold to the touch. The bed Miss Bodley was referring to was cluttered with blankets and pillows, and a pacifier was found under the blankets. A drug screen of Miss Bodley was found to be positive for Suboxone. An autopsy of the infant revealed that the baby had died from acute methamphetamine intoxication. A search warrant was executed on Miss Bodley's phone that showed Miss Bodley was actively involved in drug transactions, including the sale of methamphetamine. In August of 2023, Miss Bodley was indicted for first-degree murder and aggravated child abuse of a child under the age of 8. On October 3rd, Miss Bodley pled guilty to reckless homicide and aggravated child abuse of a child under the age of 8. She received a 12-year sentence to serve. The defendant was represented by counsel Mr. Darren Drake, and the state was represented by Assistant District Attorney Sharon Reddick. A trial is scheduled to begin on February the 2nd on Candace Davis for allegations of second-degree murder and employing a firearm during the commission of a dangerous felony. The defendant is represented by counsel Mr. Will Fraley, and the state is represented by Assistant District Attorneys Trevor Lynch and Matt Westmoreland. A trial is scheduled to begin on May 4th on Joseph Gann for allegations of second-degree murder, attempted second-degree murder, aggravated assault, reckless endangerment with a firearm, tampering with evidence, and employing a firearm during the commission of a dangerous felony. The defendant is represented by counsel Mr. Josh Crane, and the state is represented by Assistant District Attorneys Trevor Lynch and Matt Westmoreland. On December 20th of 2021, officers with the Murfreesboro Police Department responded to a domestic disturbance call in a parking lot. Officers made contact with the complainant and a witness that stated that Mr. Trevor Anderson had confronted and threatened the complainant with a firearm. Officers were in the area and responded quickly when a 911 call was made. Officers observed Mr. Anderson at the vehicle and then watched him quickly walk away. Officers were able to locate Mr. Anderson and also recovered a firearm from the vehicle. Mr. Anderson had dropped the firearm in the vehicle when he saw officers approaching. In July of 2022, a Rutherford County grand jury indicted Mr. Anderson for possession of a handgun by a convicted felon. On April 14th of 25, a jury of his peers convicted Mr. Anderson as charged. Mr. Anderson is scheduled to be sentenced on January 15th and faces a range of punishment of between 12 and 20 years to be served in the Tennessee Department of Corrections custody. The defendant was represented by counsel Mr. Darren Drake, while the state was represented by Assistant District Attorney Allison Abbott. A trial is scheduled to begin on February 9th on Corey Lillard Sr. for allegations of first-degree murder, possession of a Schedule II drug with the intent to sell, possession of a weapon by a convicted felon, employing a firearm during the commission of a dangerous felony, and possession of drug paraphernalia. The defendant is represented by counsel Mr. Will Fraley, while the state is represented by Assistant District Attorneys Trevor Lynch and Matt Westmoreland. A trial is scheduled to begin on March 2nd on Cameron Jordan for allegations of second-degree murder, reckless endangerment, tampering with evidence, employing a firearm during the commission of a dangerous felony, and unlawful possession of a weapon. The defendant is represented by counsel Mr. Derek Howard, while the state is represented by Assistant District Attorney Matt Westmoreland. A trial is scheduled to begin on August the 3rd of 2026 on Juan Charco for allegations of first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, aggravated assault, tampering with evidence, reckless endangerment with a firearm, and employing a firearm during the commission of a dangerous felony. The defendant is represented by counsel Mr. Jeff Cherry, while the state is represented by Assistant District Attorneys Trevor Lynch and Matt Westmoreland. A trial is scheduled to begin on September the 14th on Ahmad Ali and Kenyon Crawford for allegations of first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, attempted especially aggravated robbery, tampering with evidence, and employing a firearm during the commission of a dangerous felony. Both defendants are represented by counsel, Mr. Brian Lewis and Mr. Luke Willoughby, while the state is represented by Assistant District Attorneys Trevor Lynch and Matt Westmoreland. And that will conclude today's look inside the courts.
This is Paul Newman. When we return, we will tell you about a criminal case from call to conviction. You are listening to this special edition of the Action Line on WGNS.
Local farmers, local meats, vegetables, and other produce at the Winter Spring Rutherford County Farmers Market.
Bundle up and make your way every Friday at Lane Agri Park.
You know, gift cards are always the easiest gift. This is Peter Demas at Demas's Restaurant. We will buy gift cards and just kind of have them on hand. They're amazing gifts to give to teachers. If you want to give a gift at your workout groups, you have a personal trainer, family members. It's great to give gifts for 16, 17, 18 years old who are just now beginning to date, and they need to be able to have some place to take someone on a date to. Gift cards are always the easiest gift. Demas's Restaurant on Northwest Broad Street.
This is a special edition of the District Attorney Show, hosted by the Action Line on WGNS. As we begin the new year, we go back in time to re-examine one of our most compelling cases. It is the 2007 murder of Melissa Atkin. Joining me in this segment will be former District Attorney General William C. Weitzel Jr. and the judge who presided over this case, the Honorable Judge Don R. Ash. And now, call to conviction.
From call to conviction, time now for a look back at one of the more intriguing and important cases for this community. From the crime, the investigation, to the prosecution.
Domestic violence continues to be a problem in our community. It is a crime that all too often leads to murder. Today, we will highlight the domestic violence murder of 36-year-old Melissa Atkin. Melissa Atkin became romantically involved with Larry Scott Reynolds. The relationship blossomed and the two moved in together. In 2001, the couple had a child. They moved to Texas and then later moved back to Smyrna. As time passed, the relationship took a turn for the worse. And in May of 2006, the couple separated. Larry Scott Reynolds moved out, and Melissa Atkin lived alone with her small child. In the summer of 2007, child custody proceedings were beginning, and deeper problems arose. On Saturday, December 15, 2007, Melissa Atkin had spent most of the day with her mother and father. Melissa's child was with Larry Scott Reynolds that weekend. Melissa's mother and father last saw her that night as she was leaving to go home. They all planned to see each other in church the next morning. Melissa asked her mother to call her to make sure she woke up on time. At 7:30 a.m. Sunday morning, Melissa's mother calls. No one answers. They go to church, but Melissa never arrives. They continue to call, and still no answer. That afternoon, they drive to Melissa's home. The front door is locked, but they notice that the back sliding door is open. They enter the home, and inside the bedroom, they discover a parent's worst nightmare. Their daughter, Melissa Atkin, is in her bed, and she has been brutally murdered. The medical examiner determined that Melissa Atkin had been shot 3 times. Detective Ralph Mersick and Bryant Gregory are assigned to investigate the case. Through forensic evidence and witness information, they develop a strong suspect. On December 26, 2007, they arrest Larry Scott Reynolds and charge him with the first-degree murder of Melissa Atkin. The trial of the state of Tennessee versus Larry Scott Reynolds began on June the 24th, 2008. Larry Scott Reynolds was represented by Murfreesboro attorney Joe Brandon, Jr. The state prosecution team consisted of District Attorney General William C. Weitzel, Jr. and Assistant District Attorney J. Paul Newman. The trial was held in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and was presided over by the Honorable Judge Don R. Ashe. Reynolds' defense was that someone else killed Melissa Atkin. He claimed to be in Lewisburg, Tennessee, the night that Melissa Atkin was killed. The jury heard from over 30 witnesses. The trial lasted for over a week. The jury began their deliberations on May the 3rd, 2008, and after a little over 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict. The jury found Larry Scott Reynolds guilty of first-degree murder. Judge Don Ashe accepted the verdict, and Larry Scott Reynolds was sentenced to life in prison. Under this sentence, Larry Scott Reynolds will have to serve 51 years in prison before he is eligible for parole. When that time comes, he will be 89 years old. With us today in the WGNS studios is the Honorable Judge Don R. Ashe. Judge Ashe was the judge who presided over the trial. Judge Ashe, General Weitzel, and myself both welcome you to the broadcast.
Morning, Judge Ashe.
Oh, great, General. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. It's kind of like a reunion of sorts because Paul Newman, myself, have appeared before you many times, and in particular in murder cases, and this was one of those cases. Tell the listeners from the bench, the viewpoint on the from the bench, what it's like to try a murder case and the issues that are involved in that.
Well, first of all, thanks for letting me be here. I kind of refer to you two as the dynamic duo. I don't know which one's Batman and which one's Robin, but we've tried a bunch of cases, and I don't think we've ever had one reversed. I think they've all been affirmed. Like this case, it was affirmed by the Court of Appeals. Cert was denied by the Tennessee Supreme Court. Then there was a post-conviction petition saying ineffective counsel, and that too has gone through the appellate system as well. But for me, I was thinking about it this morning, it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. I try to get everything as prepared as possible so that when the trial starts, it goes smoothly. I know there's always some bumps in the road or some things we don't anticipate, but I found the more that you can prepare to make sure that things run smoothly for the defense lawyers, the district attorney generals, the jurors, and for me, it makes it a lot more easier. It's a very stressful time to sit up there and go through these trials.
You always, in dealing with these types of cases, you always gave both sides plenty of time, and we had a number of pretrial hearings, and sometimes the public doesn't understand why it takes so long for a case to actually come to trial. But the purpose of the pretrial hearings, would you kind of explain the reason we have those and how that helps in reality move the trial along once it starts?
Yeah, I've heard you ask jurors before if they've ever seen Miami, CSI, and these other things where they think that they can find a hair in an apartment and then the person gets convicted in 30 minutes. And that's just not the reality of these cases. For example, like you said on this case, lasted for a week, 30 different witnesses, experts from all from all different walks of life. But for me, the pretrial conferences really are the key, because if we can go ahead and resolve some of these evidentiary issues, what comes in, what doesn't come in, then that helps the process of the trial. And that does take a while, especially in murder cases. You can look, I think, really to do a murder case properly, from about the time of the indictment to the trial, you almost need a year. And if it's a death penalty case, which we've done some of those as well, you're really looking at a year to 18 months. And the reason for that is, I know that the victims would like to have that heard more quickly, but they also want a conviction. And so you have to make sure, and I've told victims this before, I don't want to do this twice, so I'll make sure we do it right the first time. And it's also right for the person who's charged, that our Constitution provides that they have a fair trial, and making sure that everything's out on the table, and y'all's office did that. You'd have that open file where you turned over everything in your file. So that, too, is a benefit.
Judge Ash, I know you presided over many high-profile cases, and a lot of those were murder cases. I want to ask you, dealing with so many gruesome facts and so much sadness, how does that affect you, and how do you keep your perspective?
It's a good question. Well, a couple of things. One is, after you deal with this for a while, I hate to say it, but you get used to seeing gruesome pictures. It doesn't stun you like it normally would. Especially, I try to look at them before. Usually, y'all file them in advance, so I try to go through them and look through that. So that's difficult, and there is sadness there. But there's also, I take pride in a system where justice is done, and that's really, to me, that's really, really important. That somebody's got to be up there, and like y'all, got to be up there and make the tough decisions, make the calls, sentence people, and those type things. So it is difficult. But on the other hand, too, I've really been blessed in my life. When I go home, I usually don't think about this. We've got children and grandchildren. I've got a beautiful wife, Rita, so I try to focus more on that. We've got a great church, got great friends. When I go home, I try to focus on that instead of thinking about the difficult thing.
Judge, I've also noticed that on each and every murder trial that we've had with you, and even when someone enters a plea of guilty to a murder case, you take the time to address the family members of the victim. Can you tell us, number one, why you do that and why you feel that that's important?
Sure. I think it's critical to do that. I think that people who go up there and they have to go to court so many times, by doing this, they honor the memory of the person who they've lost. The sacrifice that these families make to go up here and participate in a trial. And we've seen murder trials. If you look on the front row up there, on the left-hand side, usually the family sitting behind y'all. On the right-hand side is usually the family of the person who's accused. And there's a lot of pain and hurt and sadness that goes through that. And so if you can do anything, if I can do anything as a judge to help bring them to closure on that and make them understand the importance of the person whose life was lost, then I think that's a positive thing. Just like we give constitutional rights to the accused, we also need to honor the person who's lost.
Judge Ash, can you tell us, going back to this particular trial, what witnesses or what evidence in this case really impacted, in your thoughts, as to the jury reaching the verdict that they did?
Well, like I said, we had 30 different witnesses, so it was very, very complicated. But one of the witnesses was Mr. Reynolds' new girlfriend or ex-girlfriend who came in there. I think her name was Eve Barger. And Miss Barger, she testified that that night of the killing that Mr. Reynolds came to her, got in bed with her and told her, and was sobbing, and basically admitted that he had just killed his wife. So that was a big thing. The other thing, which I was amazed, and I usually keep, y'all file a lot of stuff, so I read everything, but the weapon that was used, I think it was a llama, which is not a very good gun, honestly, but they had these shell casings. You had those at the murder scene. You had the bullets there, and then you found two shell casings, or two bullets, I think, in the console, or that little part where you shift the gears in the car, in Miss Barger's car. And there's no way that happens. That connects everything together, which is an amazing piece of evidence. A, that y'all found, and B, that a murderer or a convicted murderer would clear out his gun and not notice that he dropped 2 bullets in between the car seats.
And I think the real importance of those particular bullets were that they had not been manufactured since 1977.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, Miss Barger was divorced. The gun belonged to her ex-husband. The shells belonged to her ex-husband. And through y'all's work and the experts y'all found, which was amazing, they could not say they were the exact same bullets, but they're that same age and that same manufacturer, which is an unbelievable part of evidence, I think.
As you know, Judge, this was a case of domestic violence. How big a problem is domestic violence, not only in Rutherford County, but throughout this nation?
Yeah, it's really big. Ever since the O.J. Simpson case, which really kind of raised, I think, everybody's level of it. But Rutherford County really has been on the cutting edge. Remember, General Weitzel helped when we got a domestic violence coordinator at the very beginning. I think that was, 15, 20 years ago. I ran a domestic violence court for a while. We have a great domestic violence program. We're making progress. I think part of it, too, is that the awareness is being raised. And so anything that we can do to raise awareness, because if you look at domestic violence, it is almost, I don't want to say genetic, but you'll see that somebody who is raised in a home where there's domestic violence, and either the man or the woman, when they get married, they think that's the way life is. And so domestic violence will continue on. So what we've got to do is figure out a way to break that chain or that legacy of domestic violence.
Judge Ash, I know that you are in the leading edge of dealing with domestic violence situations, but what message would you have to any person who's in our listening audience who may be exposed to domestic violence? What steps should they take and what should they do?
Well, historically, if you look at this, and most of the time it's women, not all the time, but most of the time it's women. But if you look at this, most women do not bring this up to someone until they've been abused about 6 or 7 times. So I would ask your listeners, if they're in a domestic violence situation, to call that Rutherford County Domestic Violence Center. They got great counselors there. They can help you at least deal with the situation, even if you don't want to file an order of protection yet. But there's a lot of help out there if you'll just call and take benefit of those resources.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you're presently doing and what role you serve in the criminal justice system?
Sure. The way it works now is I was appointed by the Tennessee Supreme Court as a senior judge, full-time, going across the state, hearing both civil and criminal cases as well as sitting on the appellate bench. So it's a cross-section of things. I'm really away from home, spending the night about 2 nights every other week, which isn't bad. But there's sometimes I'm gone for a week or two, and that's not great fun to stay in a motel for a week or two. But I'm really enjoying it. I do miss my friends up here. I miss trying cases with you two. Y'all did a great job, and we're such men of integrity. That, to me, good lawyers, really good lawyers, make judges be better. And you two made me be a better judge because you two are both such men of integrity, and you always worked so hard to make sure it was done correctly. And if there was something wrong or there was a weakness there, you would say, okay, this is. You'd be truthful with me. You'd say, this is the bad part of the case, Judge. You may not want to go there with me or something like that. And I always appreciated that because you don't get that every day. So you two are really great examples of what district attorney generals should be and really what good lawyers should be.
Judge Ash, I wanted to say that, as you've alluded to, we tried a number of cases. And many times during the course of a trial, we would argue the law, and I mean argue in a respectful way. But I'll never forget one time after a very intense argument between both sides, you were prepared to rule in our favor, and you said, General, before I rule, I want you to answer this question or think about this. Is the squeeze worth the juice?
No, is the juice worth the squeeze?
There you go. and I never forgot that. And a lot of times I found that winning the battle does not mean you're going to win the war when it goes to the appellate court. I always appreciated your preparation, your knowledge of the law, and I always felt like when we came to your court we got a fair trial. And that to me is the role of a judge, and you perform that to the highest level. And I know Paul Newman agrees with me. We sometimes would leave mad when you overruled one of our objections or didn't go our way, but in the long run, we always realized you were looking out not only for us, but for the record, and to make sure that both sides got a fair trial and that whatever happened was upheld in the higher court.
Well, like I said, I really enjoyed listening to y'all argue, and I don't think the judge is the smartest lawyer in the courtroom. I think a lot of times the lawyers are the smartest lawyer in the courtroom. I'll continue to learn from things like this, and I think too, so many of us are, and I'm guilty of this, are so competitive that a lot of times you get caught up in that win thing right there that you lose sight of the long journey. And we did have that discussion a couple of times. I said, "No, General, I'm getting ready to go with you, but if I do, I want you to understand this may be very well be an appealable issue, and we may have to come back and do this again. So you have to decide whether this juice is worth the squeeze." I think you took a recess and came back and said, "Just never mind. Let's just move on."
Yeah, I did.
And the case got affirmed.
We're going to ask Judge Ash to stick around for another segment, and we will return with our What's the Law segment after these important messages.
As attic insulation, I can just lie around.
Yeah, and you save homeowners up to 30% on their heating bills. Still, you need some exercise.
But I'm saving them hundreds of dollars.
2 words, jumping jacks.
No way, bud. I need some rest. Could you fluff my pillow?
Call Roscoe Brown Heating and Air to get your home's insulation in shape.
Oh, and pass the Cheetos.
RoscoeBrown.com. Give us a call.
Roscoe Brown. RoscoeBrown.com. Stones River Manor offers assured care.
It's so warm and welcoming.
Independent living.
What states have you lived in?
Lived in Illinois, and here my husband worked for Quick Growth.
Assisted living.
I have my own place and I love it. The Activity Center has the Bible study that I like very much.
Adult daycare and respite care, and specialized physical rehabilitation care.
I love the friendliness and the family attitude that they have here.
Visit them online at stonesrivermanor.com or stop by. They're near the intersection of Haynes Drive and Memorial Boulevard.
What's the law? Time now for an examination of the laws of Tennessee. This is not intended to be legal advice and is being presented solely for the informational benefit of our listening audience. You should always consult with an attorney whenever you need or rely on legal advice.
Today, we want to look at a defense that is known as the alternate suspect defense. In this case, the defendant, Mr. Reynolds, who was represented by Joe Brandon, said not only I didn't do it, I was somewhere else, in other words, an alibi, but they wanted to offer proof that this other person had committed the crime. And when we look at alternate suspect defense, the rule is really a simple rule of evidence, the rule of relevancy. If it's relevant to the issues at hand, it should be admissible unless there is a reason such as that the probative value of the evidence is outweighed by the prejudice it might cause, or it might confuse the issues in the case. As luck would have it, and Paul, you know this, every time we prepare for a murder case, there would be something that was really just unbelievable, and that was the case here. On the computer of the victim, there were some emails or conversations between a person that was only known as Kenny. And Detective Mersick investigated that and determined who Kenny was able to get through the computer provider a name and located this person. And as I recall, it was a young lady that lived in the state of Texas. And her boyfriend was from Dixon, Tennessee, and she suspected her boyfriend of having an affair. So she created this false persona on Facebook, I believe, known as Kenny, and she was using that to try to determine if her boyfriend was having an affair by talking with different women in the area, and somehow or another she talked with the victim here, and I think they might have talked 2 or 3 times on the internet. As I recall, it was about cooking mostly, but Mr. Brandon, being the good attorney he is, latched onto that and wanted to say that this was an alternate suspect, that Kenny was in fact a male when we know it was a female, and that for some reason, this lady in Texas believed that Miss Adkin was having an affair with her boyfriend, and she came up here and killed her. And as luck would have it, lo and behold, on the weekend of this homicide, she had traveled from Texas to visit her boyfriend in Dixon, Tennessee, and I believe they'd gone deer hunting. And so Mr. Brandon was seeking to introduce that testimony to try to cast suspicion on this young lady from Texas, to say she killed Miss Adkin out of a fit of jealousy because she suspected her of having an affair with her boyfriend who she didn't even know. So this was one of the areas that came up during the trial where Judge Ash had to rule as to whether or not Mr. Brandon was going to be allowed to proceed with this alternative suspect theory. And as I mentioned, the key is whether the evidence is relevant. And the courts have held, and the law is, that a defendant is entitled to present evidence implicating another in a crime only if it is relevant under our rules, and it would not be unfairly prejudicial or confuse the jury or be a waste of time, things of that nature. And the evidence to establish that someone other than the defendant is guilty must be evidence that would be relevant in a trial of the third party, the person that the alternative suspect. And also, the evidence must clearly connect or point to another person in order to be relevant. And in this case, Judge Ash ruled that the evidence was not relevant, and that just to cast a bare suspicion on another or to raise a conjecture or an inference is not admissible because there is not a sufficient connection that directly connects this third party with the commission of this offense. And Judge Ash, I know that you've mentioned you've tried some cases involving Mr. Newman and I, and certainly Mr. Brandon has appeared in 2 or 3 murder cases in your court, and he's always been a very strong advocate for his clients. But do you recall this alternative suspect?
I do. And you're right, Mr. Brandon always does a really good job. But I do remember that. But that's the great thing for me about being a judge, is the case law to me is so clear. It's like baseball. It doesn't make any difference whether you're a good person or a bad person. You get 3 strikes and you're out. And so the law here is so clear about whether it's relevant or not, and confusing to the jury. And then you've got that that balancing test between probative value and prejudicial effect. And if you remember also in this case, they also wanted to bring up, in Nashville, there was this wooded rapist that was kind of wandering around killing somebody, and they wanted to bring that up too. And it falls into the exact same thing again. It's speculation, there's no real connection, and it would just be confusing to the jury. So I ruled that could not be put in. But if you remember, we did do an offer of proof. She testified. She came up and testified, not in front of the jury, but answered all those questions, laid out all those facts, and then I made that determination. So that gives the appellate court the opportunity to review my decision and what I looked at in regard to making that decision. And if you remember, they affirmed that on the appellate level. They said I was correct in that ruling. So,
and to go a little further, I have to credit the detective involved, Detective Mercick, because he was able to identify this person with whom Miss Adkin had been communicating, got in touch with her, found her in Texas, and as you correctly remember, we brought her up here so that she could testify. She'd never heard of anybody involved in this case, and admitted that she had created this false persona on Facebook to do this little investigation, and other than talking to Miss Atkin, had never met her, didn't know where she lived, and like I say, they talked about cooking. It had nothing to do with relationships. And to further to your point about the wooded rapist, I remember that there was a report on the night of the homicide of a suspicious four-wheeler in the woods behind Miss Atkins' house, and that was where the wooded rapist came in, and of course the police looked into that, and there was nothing to that either.
Before we close this segment, I think all of us want to pay tribute to the family of Melissa Atkins. I know that the mother and the father and the brother and the other members of the family cooperated fully with us through this investigation and through the trial. And Bill, is there anything you'd like to say?
I just, this was a very emotional case for everyone involved. It always puts a lot of pressure on you because you want to make sure that you do the best you can do. And I think that we've always tried to do that, and I complimented Judge Ash earlier. He always tried to do and did do the best job he could do by being prepared. He understood the evidence. He understood the case law. So he always showed up. And as I said, we always felt like we would get a fair trial, and we did.
Judge Ash, we want to thank you for being here today, and we want to thank you for the service that you provide, not only to Rutherford County, but the state of Tennessee.
Well, being a judge, one of the great blessings of my life, and getting to work with really good lawyers like y'all, been pretty fun. I enjoy it.
This was a very sad case, and one of the saddest facts in this case was that Melissa Atkin died, leaving behind her 6-year-old son, Lucas. And what added to the sadness was that her son, Lucas, had to bear the last name of the man who killed his mother. Lucas wanted to change his last name, and Lucas also wanted to be adopted by his mother's parents. Lucas had lived with his mother's parents following her death and loved them very much. But because he was a minor and other considerations, Lucas's wishes could not be granted. All of that changed January the 15th, 2020, a very special day for many reasons. It was the day that Lucas's mother would have celebrated her 46th birthday. It was a special day because on this day, Lucas appeared before Senior Judge Don R. Ash. Judge Ash was the judge who 12 years earlier had presided over the trial of the man who killed Lucas's mother. It was a special day, for on this day, Senior Judge Don Ash granted 2 very special wishes for Lucas. Yes, it was a special day, a day when Judge Ash would grant Lucas's request to change his name to Lucas Atkin. And it was on this special day that 18-year-old Lucas Atkin was adopted by his mother's parents, Douglas and Linda Atkin. Yes, it was indeed a very special day.
The monthly District Attorney Show, heard the first Friday of each month, exclusively on News Radio WGNS.
Hi, this is Tina Fox at the Rutherford Farmers Co-op. If you're looking for that unique gift for Christmas, please come see us for all your holiday needs. We have a great selection of gift items for the young and old, and also for your feathered or furry friends. So come see us. The Rutherford Farmers Co-op. In our toy department, we have our Melissa and Doug toys, Ertl toys, Big Country, and Schleich animals. The Rutherford Farmers Co-op, 985 Middle Tennessee Boulevard, just off of South Church.
Friends? Yes. The financial partners whom you've built a relationship with at Old National Bank are still at the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard location, right here in the borough. And so are the warm, homemade cookies.
Cookies are ready, dear.
Like Grandma used to make. If you need online and mobile banking, Murfreesboro's Old National Bank does that too. You and Old National Bank, better together.
Old National Bank at 2230 Dr. MLK Jr. Boulevard. Old National Bank, member FDIC.
The monthly District Attorney Show, heard exclusively on News Radio WGNS the first Friday of each month.
If you missed any part of this program, it will be available shortly as a podcast on the WGNS website. As we end our program today, we thank WGNS for providing the airtime. And we thank our producer, Scott Walker. Most of all, we thank you for listening. We leave now by saying, a safe community is the responsibility of each and every one of us. For my 2 co-hosts, Rutherford County District Attorney General Jennings Jones and Rutherford County Assistant District Attorney Trevor Lynch, this is J. Paul Newman, bidding all of you a safe and blessed day.
The District Attorney's Office thanks you for listening to today's program. If you have any information regarding criminal activity in our community, please contact one of our law enforcement agencies. The information presented on today's show is solely for informational benefit and not intended to be legal advice. You should always consult an attorney whenever you need or rely on legal advice. Rutherford County's most trusted name in news. Talk Radio WGNS, Murfreesboro.